Hello everybody, so we're going to be starting with the base. I like to use square wire for these structural sections of the pendant, just because I think square wire is a lot more structurally sound, if that makes any sense. Obviously it takes a bit more work than your round wire would, because you have to be mindful of the corners and the edges when you're shaping it so that they don't actually twist, so take your time with that. Because it's such a heavy gauge as well, you'll need to form and shape it quite slowly with your hands, and I take my time with that, and bend it and manipulate it until I'm happy. So you can kind of shape it from the bottom outwards, and then once you have kind of a desired base shape, I'd call it, I then just gently pull it in from the two tips at the top like that. So just gently pull that and then shape, and it just takes time, and just manipulate it until it roughly fits the stone. So this is what it looks like. So you just have to be mindful that you need enough space for when you're attaching the base wires later on, that the stone still fits in it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, once we've shaped it, we're going to bend the top so that it looks like that. And we need to close off the bail. So for that, I'm bringing in my round wire. You can use 0.8 or 1 mil, that works as well. So we're just going to attach the little tail at the base so that it's got an anchor point. So you just need a small 1 centimeter section. We're just going to wrap it around the frame itself a couple of times so that it has an anchor point. And then we're going to wrap the half round wire around the bail section. And again, take your time with that and be as neat as possible, because it's one of the sections that's going to be shown in your pendant, and that's what it looks like. So I just use my pliers to kind of flatten out the ends and press it down gently, not too hard, so you don't distort the actual wrap. And next we're going to shape it with a bail making pliers. You probably need a little bit of that because it's quite heavy gauge, so you can try and shape it by hand, which is something what I tend to do on occasion, but to start off with, I use my bail making pliers. And then when the tails are a little bit long like this, I kind of bend the ends around a little bit, just so that I can fit it through the loop. As I said, this wire is quite a heavy gauge, so you might have to fight it a little bit. And this is usually the sort of, toughest part of creating pendants with heavier gauges, because you have to get used to the heavier gauges and working with them. But I think it's worth it for me, because I can do so much more with the structure than if I have finer wires. So next, I'm just going to bend these legs around the frame itself. Just one wrap is more than enough, because obviously it's quite heavy gauge, as I said, and it will stay in place. Use my half round, my bent nose pliers, and then you'll need your heavy duty cutters. You don't have to be able to go all the way through. You can just gauge the wire like that, and then you can sort of break it through, because it doesn't really have quite a lot of tensile strength, so it'll torque strength, it'll break quite easily. So next we're going to bring in some square wire for the base for the stone to sit in, and all we're going to do is wrap that square wire around the frame. Again, be sure that the flat side of the wire sits flush against the frame, otherwise you'll have an edge, and for some reason it likes to do that. It'll have an edge sitting up, and obviously this bulks everything out, so just make sure when you're wrapping it's flat. So we're going to do the same on the other side, and the second side will be a lot easier to do because there's already something holding it in place on the other side, so that's much easier to wrap. And I quite like to have a little tail, not too long, just long enough to grab on, but not too long so it gets stuck in the frame, and then just wrap. So that's all of them attached, and just make sure your stone fits. As I said earlier, your stone needs to be able to fit in between all the attachments where the wire goes. So we're going to cut some wires here. We're going to actually cut 4 lengths, not 3. You only see 3 here, but it's 4 length, and we're going to attach that to the frame and wrap it around at halfway point twice. The reason being twice is if you just wrap it once, there isn't enough structure there and it's floppy. So make sure when you're attaching all of these wires, they are attached and wrapped around the frame twice. And just give it a bit of a pull, and then we're going to do that again. And then once I've done that, I tend to take a pair of pliers and I pinch it down quite hard. Obviously be gentle. You'll see why I say gentle later on. So I've attached these now. What we're going to do is do our first weave. This is a very simple 2x5 weave, which is the weave we're going to be using throughout the design. So I'm going to show it once in full length here, and then I'm going to shorten it at a later stage so that you don't really get bored watching me do this over and over again, because it's the same thing. So to do this weave, we're going to wrap the 0.4 around the base wire, the two base wires. We've got one at the top and one at the bottom, and we're only having two wires in this weave. So wrap the 0.4 or whatever weaving wire you have around the bottom base wire 5 times, and just take your time with that. So just make sure it's neat and tidy. When you are at the beginning of the weave, it's always a little bit more fiddly than when you further on, because there's nothing to hold on to. So just take your time with that and be as neat as possible. So once you've done your 5 wraps, you can then bring the weaving wire around both wires at the same time. You see me here using my pliers, and that actually helps me to push the weave together and just make sure I stay as neat as I possibly can. So wrap around both base wires at the same time twice, and then we start afresh. So it's 5 wraps around the bottom and 2 wraps around both, and then we repeat. So it's a very simple weave, and it's a great weave if you haven't done any wire weaving at all before, to practice, and just keep doing that until you've got enough of the weave. So we've got 18 sets here. So bear in mind that my stone is a certain size, so when you are weaving, you need to adjust that to the size of your stone. So this may vary for you. So we're going to recreate what we've done. Again, it's a 2x5, and I'm not going to go into it. So this is what we have. So we have, in my case, 13 sets of the weave again. And what we need to do next is attach the base wires on the other side. So remember how I was telling you just now about using your pliers to squish it down? Well, you'll see why you have to be very careful with it in a moment. So I'm attaching it on the other side, and I'm wrapping it around. And always make sure that the wraps sort of go into the same direction, so that the spacing between the base wires are the same all the time. I just prefer to do that, but everybody's different. So we're going to be attaching all the wires on the other side as well. So there's the other 3, and we're going to wrap these around as well. So I've attached these now, and I squished them down with my pair of pliers, and then this happened. Yep, this happened because I squished down too hard with my pair of pliers, and it marred the wire. And as I was talking about torque strength earlier, and it was damaged and weakened, and it just broke off. So now what we're going to have to do is improvise with the wires we have. So we're going to continue with just 3 wires on the left, and then the 4 wires on the right. So we're going to take the wrap on the right, and we're going to go over the stone like so, and we are wrapping it around the frame and just gently over your stone. This is not going to keep it in place or anything, because obviously it's just a very loose wrap. So this is just to start with the design. I keep my hands over the stone to keep it in place, just so that I get an idea of where I want the wrap to sit. You can use a little bit of tape if you have anything. I can't remember what that white tape's called. I think it's like a bandage tape that will not damage your stone. It comes off easily, so you can use that to keep it in place if you feel uncomfortable to weave without anything keeping the stone in place while you attach. So going to wrap the wires around the bail, so going through the inside of the bail, and then again around it twice just to make sure that it's nice and tight. You're not going to see this wrap later on because it's going to be hidden, but still always try and be as neat and tidy as possible. You see me here using the same weaving and base wires. I'm the kind of person that likes to reuse the same wires in my design, so I just tend to work and add in as little as possible. Everybody's different. You can obviously cut the weaving wire and then add in when you start a new weave. You know, this is just the way I've done it. It's a little bit more fiddly, but yeah, you can just decide how you'd like to do it. So once we've done the first, we're going to wrap the second wire around, and we're going to follow the same path and then attach to the frame just as before. So once it's attached, make sure that it's got your 2 wraps, and this is what it looks like. So next we are going to create some more of the 2x5 weaves. So feed your 0.4 through or attach more 0.4 in. It's entirely up to you how you do it. And again, it's another 2x5 weave. So we're just wrapping around the base wires 5 times and around both wires twice. So that's what it looks like. In my case, again, I've done 18 sets. As I said, it's different for your stone, so you just need to adjust it for that. And we're just kind of going to follow the curve that we have created with the previous weaves. So it's kind of the line, and you're just going to take your time and shape it, and you can always readjust it a little bit later. The weaves are quite loose, so once you have attached them approximately in the place you want to, you can shape them a little bit with your pliers, so it's not set in stone. I often readjust the way my pendants look after I've attached wires, because I don't like the way it looks, so you can do that. So just attach to the frame. Use your pair of pliers. If you struggle, the busier or it gets, the more you need to use your tools to help you. There you go. So next we're going to create another 2x5 weave at the top. Sorry, we're not doing a 2x5 weave. This is just a very simple coil. So all it is wrap your base wire, your weaving wire around the base, and we are just going to coil it until we've got a long enough length. So this is my coil, and I'm going to follow the initial line that I just have created with the 2x5, and I'm going to attach this to the frame again in the same sort of direction as we have attached all the other wires, because I tend to do that to reuse them later. So make sure it's secure and pull that through, and again make sure it goes through twice so that you've got a very nice and tight fit, and then use your pliers to kind of pinch it down. Just make sure obviously not to damage your wires like I did, otherwise they'll fall off, and you'll have to add in more or improvise, so whichever. So we're going to follow with the last wire. We're going to keep this one bare, and we are just again going to follow the general direction of the other weaves and attach to the frame. And that's what it looks like so far. So now we're going to focus on the other side with our 3 wires that we've got left. So if you still have 4, you can cut one off and use the wires that you have then available, or you can actually improvise as well, and just adapt the tutorial to use all the 4 wires. So we're going to spread out the top 2 wires, and again it's a 2x5 weave, so just as was done before, and this is what it looks like. Sorry, it was the bottom 2 wires, not the top. Bottom 2 when you flip the pendant the right way up. So we're going to shape this weave around the stone, and we're going to go upwards towards the frame, and again always take your time with that, and you know, before you attach anything, make sure you're happy with the way it sits. When you feed your wires through, already make sure that they are sitting parallel to each other and following the lines without crossing over, because it's quite hard to adjust the way the wires sit once they're gone through the frame if there's no space. So when you feed them through, make sure that they're already parallel, if there's no space where between the stone and and the frame. So just pull that tight until you're satisfied with the way it sits, and then obviously wrap around the frame twice until you're happy with the result. And that's what it looks like so far, and just attach like so. So that's what it looks like. So we're going to again use the wires that we have available to shape, and I'm going to use a single wire that's left over on the bottom to follow the curve we have created. And again, I'm going to go through the frame on the inside this time. I want the wire to sit on the inside, and this is what it looks like attached. Next, we are going to use the remaining 2 wires to create another 2x5 weave, and this weave is going to follow the stone all the way to the bottom to finally set it in place, so that the stone is anchored to the frame, because it's still able to slip out at the moment, so we need to make sure it's anchored. So we're going to do the 2x5 weave just like we've done before, like so. Just keep wrapping, and that's what it looks like. Again, in my instance, I've got 17 sets, and what I'm going to do is, you watch me here, use my finger to kind of lay this weave around and shape it, and bring it down and across the stone in a section where it will kind of prevent the stone from dropping out the bottom. To attach it, we're still going to secure it a little bit further later on, but this will already keep it in place. So again, shape it until you're satisfied and attach the wires to the frame at the bottom. This will be quite a tight fit, so remember, as I said earlier, make sure the wires are parallel before feeding them through, so that you don't have to fight the wire later on to attach it to the frame. So that's what it looks like attached. And we've got 1 more wire left at the top, and we're going to again follow the direction of the previous weave, and I'm not going to do anything to that wire. You can make a coil if you wanted to, or if you have the 4th wire left, you can create another 2x5. If you've not cut it off, it's entirely up to you. And then obviously again attach it to the frame just like we did with the other. Just remember to do it twice. There you go, and that's what it looks like. So now it's time to trim off all the excess. We're going to keep 1 wire at the bottom. This will be used to create a little coil around the bottom frame to further anchor the stone in place. Now, when you're cutting wires, just make sure that you trim them in an area that is hidden, so it doesn't snag on clothing or anything like that. So when you're cutting, just make sure it's hard to reach. So we're going to wrap the base wire. We're going to use 0.4 and coil, and this is a coil that's going to sit around the bottom of the stone, and I'm going to trim off all the weaving wires because we don't need them anymore, unless you've got more things you'd like to do with the remaining wires. You can adapt this design to your liking. I've just cut them off, and we're going to attach this to the frame, and that's what it looks like. So this is it, and as I was saying earlier, when you're cutting off your wires, make sure they're neat and tidy so they don't snag anywhere. And that's the piece so far. And lastly, we're going to attach our beads. Just make sure that you anchor the wire around a wire coming from the top of the frame so that your beads sit securely. You're going to have to gauge the amount of beads you need depending on your stone size. And then once you're done, obviously trim off the excess wires, and then that's that. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials. Pop by and visit me on my Facebook, Instagram or TikTok account for more or different content. I do have a little support group for our wire wrap community, which is called Wire Wrap and Jewelry Artists Worldwide. We always have little competitions going and challenges and little fun interactions going on the site, so do pop by. And lastly, I do sell kits for a lot of my tutorials, as well as square and half round wire. You can find all of this on my website at imbalicrafts.com. And yes, that's it. So as I said, thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.